There is a moment in your life when something inside you stops pretending it doesn't know. A moment when a quiet truth rises from beneath your thoughts and whispers. Wealth begins with who you believe you are. And once this truth is heard, truly heard, something irreversible happens. You cannot return to the old rhythm of fear and hustle because the old rhythm no longer fits the size of your soul. You begin to sense that money has never been outside of you. It has always responded to the identity you carry in silence. This realization is gentle, yet it shakes you. It is subtle, yet it rearranges the way you breathe. Maybe you've been living with the weight of a story that says money comes from effort, exhaustion, sacrifice, or some external approval you haven't received yet. Maybe you've been carrying the quiet insecurity that whispers, "What if I'm not the kind of person money chooses?" And this insecurity doesn't scream, it hides. It shows up in the hesitation before you make a decision, in the discomfort you feel when opportunities appear, in the voice that says, "Not yet, maybe later, maybe when I deserve it more." It's not that you're wrong, it's that you've been conditioned to believe wealth is earned through doing, instead of recognized through being. You've been taught to run, but not to receive, to chase, but not to assume, to want, but not to embody. Every morning, before your feet touch the ground, your subconscious is already deciding how much money you believe is possible for you today. Bruce Lipton would say this isn't abstract, it's biological. Your body, your nervous system, your perception, they are all shaped by the identity you've been rehearsing since childhood. If you've lived in survival mode, your biology adapts to survival. If you've lived around scarcity, your inner settings adjust to scarcity. Not because you lack power, but because your inner world learned to keep you safe by keeping things predictable. And wealth, for many people, is not yet predictable. It's unfamiliar. So their inner system quietly aligns with just enough, even while their conscious mind prays for overflow. But there comes a moment, perhaps this one, when the old identity begins to feel too small, too tight, too borrowed. You start noticing that your desire for abundance is not a fantasy, it is a memory of who you truly are. You begin to understand that the conflict inside you was never between you and money. It was between the identity you continued to carry and the identity you were born to embody. You wanted prosperity, but you kept assuming yourself as someone who survives. You wanted expansion, but you kept returning to the emotional posture of someone who waits. You wanted wealth, but you continued to feel like a guest in the rooms where wealthy people feel at home. Neville Goddard taught that money is not an object, it is a state of consciousness. And as soon as you understand this, not intellectually but viscerally, everything changes. Because if money is consciousness, then the only thing that ever mattered was the level of consciousness you were operating from. The world has been mirroring your inner assumptions with perfect fidelity. Your bank account has been reflecting who you assumed yourself to be when no one was watching. The opportunities that came and the ones that slipped through your fingers were answering the same silent signal, the signal of your identity. This is the threshold where the shift begins. You stop trying to become rich in the future and begin stepping into the identity of someone who is wealthy now. Not because of the numbers, not because of the lifestyle, but because of the internal knowing. Wealth as presence, wealth as posture, wealth as normal. You start to feel the difference between effort and embodiment, between chasing and assuming, between hoping and inhabiting. And something in you relaxes, because for the first time the journey to abundance doesn't feel like a climb, it feels like a return. Once you see what money really is, consciousness, identity, a reflection of your inner state, the old narrative collapses, the old pressure dissolves. You can't go back to believing you need to burn yourself out to deserve prosperity. You can't go back to thinking money is external, scarce, or distant. You can't go back to the version of you that hustles for permission to receive what is already waiting. Because now you know, the universe was never responding to your effort, it was responding to your assumption. And this awareness is a doorway that does not close. Take a breath and let this settle in your body. Let it move through your chest, your throat, your shoulders. Let it reach the places where fear used to sit, because from this moment forward, wealth stops being something you pursue and becomes something you embody. And the moment you embody it, the world begins to shift around you. You are not stepping into a new life, you are stepping into a new identity, one that money already recognizes. For so long, You've chased money with the inner posture of someone who needs it to survive. You've moved through life with the subtle tension of someone who feels behind. That hidden feeling of lack has shaped your decisions, your opportunities, your reactions. You can feel it in the moment you hesitate before saying yes, in the discomfort that rises when abundance gets too close, in the quiet assumption that says, I should be grateful for what I have. I shouldn't expect more. This identity of need doesn't come from weakness. It comes from repetition. It comes from being conditioned to expect less than what your soul remembers. And even when you try to rise, the old identity pulls you back to the emotional temperature it's familiar with, like a thermostat, quietly resetting the room. Modern psychology would say that true autonomy becomes impossible when your identity is built around survival. Self-determination theory explains that a person who sees themselves as someone who barely gets by cannot make expansive decisions, even when expansion is available. That inner survival mode doesn't allow space for creativity, clarity, or accurate risk assessment. It keeps you leaning toward the safest choice, the most familiar option, the path that feels predictable. And it's not because you lack intelligence or ambition. It's because your identity has been trained to protect you from the unknown, even if the unknown is abundance. And yet there comes a revelation that begins to rewrite everything. You realize you do not need more money to change your life. You need a different identity. Not a louder one, not a more confident one, but a truer one that matches who you already feel yourself becoming. Wealth is not something you chase step by step. Wealth is a byproduct, not of strategy, but of self-concept. When you shift who you believe you are, your decisions change on their own. Your posture changes, your energy changes, your expectations change, and life adjusts itself to confirm the new identity you've decided to inhabit. The world has no choice but to follow the one who leads from within. There is a question that quietly opens the doorway to this shift. What identity does your current financial reality assume you are living in? Not the identity you want to have tomorrow. Not the identity you perform in front of others. The identity that runs in the background when you're alone, when you're checking your balance, when you're paying a bill, when you imagine the future. That silent identity has been narrating your entire financial experience, and when you finally look at it without judgment, you begin to feel an inner widening, a space opening. Because awareness itself is already transformation. The moment you see the script, you are no longer trapped inside it. It can be helpful to see this through a simple image. Imagine a thermostat set permanently to 60 degrees. You can turn on the heater, you can bring blankets, you can light a fire. But no matter how warm the space becomes, the thermostat will eventually pull the temperature back down. Not out of malice, out of programming. Your money identity works the same way. You may receive unexpected income, find new opportunities, get a promotion, or manifest a burst of abundance. But if your identity is still calibrated to survival, the financial temperature will always return to the familiar level. Not because you're failing, but because the setting hasn't changed. This is not a warning, it is an invitation. Because once you see the mechanism, you can finally step out of the loop. You can rise without collapsing back into the old version of you. You can expand without fear that something will pull you back. You can begin to create wealth not from effort, but from identity. The identity that was always waiting beneath the layers of survival. The identity that remembers who you truly are. There is a deeper paradox here, one that almost feels cruel until you understand its wisdom. Every time you try harder from a place of lack, you are unconsciously declaring that you do not have what you want. Your effort becomes a broadcast. Your body communicates the truth beneath your words. I am not yet the person wealth flows to. So the world mirrors this vibration faithfully. More effort, more tension, more chasing. More almost there but never quite. Not because abundance is teasing you, but because the frequency you are operating from is still rooted in the assumption that wealth is something distant, something external, something you must earn through struggle. But wealth never answers struggle. It answers identity. There is a moment when you realize that the chase itself has been blocking you, that your frantic movement was not proving your worth, but avoiding your power. When this truth surfaces, it does not ask you to stop acting. It asks you to stop acting from fear, to let your actions rise from the identity of someone who already has what they desire. not someone begging for it from the outside. This shift is subtle, yet it rearranges everything. Instead of planning every detail of your future, you begin allowing life to meet you halfway. Instead of forcing outcomes, you begin moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are supported. Instead of hustling to survive, you begin choosing from the state of someone who thrives. There is a simple internal shift that can open the doorway to this new posture, a moment of stillness where you step out of the chase and step into the feeling of already having. Not to distract yourself, not to escape reality, but to remind your subconscious of the truth you are claiming. When you rest into that identity, even briefly, your nervous system recalibrates. Your energy softens. Ideas arise with clarity instead of pressure. Opportunities become visible again. You begin to discern what is truly aligned from what is simply familiar, and life starts moving toward you because you have stopped running away from your own power. If you imagine a person in the desert, desperately chasing a mirage, you begin to understand the emotional exhaustion of effort-based manifestation. No matter how fast they run, the water stays just out of reach because the water was never created by running. The moment they stop, the moment they realign, the moment they shift their inner state, the mirage dissolves, and the real oasis appears not as a reward for effort, but as a reflection of alignment. In the same way, wealth does not respond to forcing, pushing, or proving. It responds to the quiet, steady frequency of someone who knows they are already connected to abundance. When scarcity takes root, the brain becomes overprotective. It exaggerates risks and diminishes opportunities. It makes you doubt your timing, your intuition, your worth. Neuroscience shows that chronic scarcity reduces cognitive capacity, sometimes by the equivalent of losing a significant portion of your intelligence in the moments you need it most. Your mind becomes foggy, your attention narrows, your ability to plan for the future is replaced by a fixation on immediate problems. This isn't a flaw in your character, it's a survival response. Your mind is doing what it believes will keep you safe. But the very mechanism designed to protect you ends up limiting you, confining you to the familiar edges of the life you already know. You may have judged yourself harshly for financial mistakes, for opportunities you didn't take, for decisions you made from fear. But the truth is simpler. Scarcity hijacks cognition. It changes the quality of your thinking. It creates an emotional tunnel that blocks the spaciousness needed for clarity and abundance. You're not bad with money. You're not careless. You're not broken. You've simply been trying to navigate life while breathing through a narrow emotional aperture. And when you finally see this, a gentle understanding arises within you. You realize that the struggle was never about capability. It was about the weight you were carrying in your mind. There is a tender shift that happens when you begin to imagine your future from a different identity. Instead of planning from fear, you allow yourself to feel from abundance. Instead of thinking from survival, you sense from possibility. This expands your inner horizon. You begin to make choices from the version of you who is already resourced, calm, and supported. It is not about pretending. It is about teaching your nervous system a new normal. When you let your imagined future inform your present decisions, you loosen the grip of scarcity on your mind. You start to respond to life instead of reacting to it. And your actions become aligned not with who you have been, but with who you are becoming. The emotional nature of scarcity can be understood through a simple image. Imagine a gardener planting seeds, but digging them up every day to check if they're growing. The soil becomes disturbed. The seeds never root. The garden never blossoms. Not because it lacks potential, but because the conditions never allowed anything to grow. Scarcity does the same to your life. It pulls up your dreams before they can take root. It interrupts your momentum before it can stabilize. It keeps you living in the tension of uncertainty instead of the trust of unfolding. And yet, once you see this metaphor clearly, something profound softens inside you. You recognize that growth doesn't require force, it requires steadiness. Most people move through life believing that money is an external force, something that must be earned through logic, hard work, or relentless discipline. They imagine it as a distant mountain to climb, a target they must chase with precision. But the moment you begin exploring the inner landscape of consciousness, you notice a simple truth rising to the surface. Your experience with money has always matched your assumptions about your own worth. You receive according to the identity you have normalized. You keep according to the identity you embody. You lose according to the identity you fear. The currency you deal with is not dollars, it is the frequency of your internal state. Neville Goddard understood this with absolute clarity. He taught that consciousness objectifies itself, meaning, what you hold as true within you inevitably takes form around you. Money is not attracted or pushed away. It is expressed. It appears wherever the state of wealth is already alive. When you assume yourself to be someone who is supported, valued, and capable, the outer world arranges itself to match that assumption with quiet precision. But when you assume yourself to be someone who struggles, doubts, or survives, the world mirrors that identity as well. This is why two people with equal education and effort can live entirely different financial lives. Their results follow their inner posture. There is a moment of liberation when you finally feel this in your body. A moment when you stop waiting for money to arrive and begin stepping into the emotional frequency of someone who is already wealthy within. This shift is not made through imagination alone. It is made through embodiment. It is a felt sense, a steady, grounded certainty, a calm expectation. You begin to inhabit the identity of someone who does not worry about money, not because they are irresponsible, but because they are rooted in a deeper truth. They know they are supported. They know opportunities recognize them. They know abundance responds to their energy, not their anxiety. This shift can be understood through a simple and powerful image. Think of electricity. You don't chase it. You don't negotiate with it. You don't run around trying to convince it to enter your home. You simply plug into a circuit that is already flowing. Money operates with the same principle. It is not something someone hands you. It is a field you connect with, a frequency determined by your sense of self, your assumptions about life, and the emotional atmosphere you carry. When your identity aligns with abundance, you plug into the current where wealth already exists. You stop trying to force outcomes and begin allowing them. You stop begging life for support and begin expecting it from a place of naturalness. And as this understanding settles, you begin to feel how much gentler wealth can be. Money stops feeling like a chase and becomes an extension of your inner state. Opportunities no longer appear random. They arise from coherence. Decisions become clearer because they are made from alignment rather than pressure. You no longer fear losing what you have because you recognize that wealth is not a possession. It is a state of being, and a state cannot be taken from you. It can only be chosen or abandoned. Most people imagine that their blocks come from limiting beliefs, but the truth is more embodied. Your nervous system is the gatekeeper of everything you allow yourself to experience. If a state feels unfamiliar, if it feels overwhelming, if it triggers old wounds or unresolved memories, your system will gently, and sometimes forcefully, pull you back toward what it knows how to regulate. This is not self-sabotage, it is protection. The same mechanism that kept you safe in difficult moments now limits you when you try to step into a larger life. This pattern is often unconscious, woven into the fabric of your emotional memory, shaping your reactions before you have time to think. Neuroscience explains that the body resists any identity it cannot stabilize. This resistance is subtle but powerful. It can show up as procrastination, as undercharging, as rejecting opportunities, as losing money soon after receiving it, or as attracting situations that reinforce the belief that abundance is unstable. These patterns do not come from a lack of intelligence or discipline. They come from the mismatch between the wealth you consciously desire and the identity your body feels prepared to inhabit. Until the nervous system expands, abundance feels threatening, even when it's wanted. There is a gentle transformation that begins the moment you allow yourself to imagine holding more. Not chasing more, not forcing more, holding more. The moment you picture yourself calmly receiving larger sums, making decisions with clarity, experiencing visibility without shrinking, something begins to recalibrate within you. You introduce your system to a new emotional normal. You let the identity of someone who is resourced and stable become familiar rather than foreign. And as this familiarity grows, your capacity to receive grows with it. You no longer tense at the thought of expansion. You no longer brace for loss. You begin to sense the steadiness of a person who can sustain abundance without fear. This inner process can be understood through a simple metaphor. Imagine a small cup placed under a waterfall. No matter how much water flows, the cup can only hold what its size allows. Anything beyond that spills out. It is not the water's fault. It is not the cup's fault. It is a matter of capacity. When you desire more wealth without expanding your emotional container, the overflow cannot stay. But the moment you grow the container, gently, naturally, consciously, you become capable of holding more without losing it, fearing it, or pushing it away. For many people, the identity of just enough feels safer than the identity of overflow. Not because overflow is bad, but because overflow is unfamiliar. When you grow up watching the people around you struggle, sacrifice, or stretch themselves thin, your nervous system silently learns that stability comes from managing scarcity, not abundance. You become emotionally fluent in making do with little, in surviving with limited resources, in feeling responsible for keeping things together. Survival becomes your baseline. And without noticing, your mind begins to recreate the emotional climate it knows how to navigate, even when your soul longs for something larger. Psychology calls this the imprint of early emotional roles. The financial patterns of your caregivers, their beliefs about money, the fears they carried, the responsibilities they juggled, all of these shape your subconscious expectations. If you watched your parents worry about bills, fear debt, sacrifice their needs, or feel unworthy of comfort, your mind may have concluded that abundance is not normal, that it is rare, unpredictable, or even unsafe. This imprint becomes the internal map that guides your decisions, not consciously, but through subtle emotional codes that influence how you earn, how you spend, how you save, and how you receive. The twist is that this loop does not reflect who you truly are. It reflects who you once had to be, the person who survived difficulty, the person who learned to minimize needs, the person who made themselves small to avoid conflict or disappointment, the person who equated financial comfort with danger, because comfort was never reliable. These adaptations were intelligent. They protected you. But now they keep you circling the same financial experiences, creating a sense of déjà vu. The same numbers, the same tensions, the same patterns appearing again and again. There is a shift that begins when you recognize this loop with compassion instead of judgment. You stop blaming yourself for repetition and begin seeing that your mind has simply been loyal to an outdated emotional script. That loyalty can be rewritten. The moment you say, even softly, "I am the one who thrives, not the one who barely makes it," you begin to introduce a new identity into your system. This identity is not forced. It is not an affirmation shouted into the void. It is a quiet remembering of a truth that has always belonged to you. The truth that abundance is not a privilege granted to a few. It is a state of being you can choose once your mind and body feel safe enough to embrace it. The blockade is subtle. It hides in the longing. When you say, "I am becoming wealthy," your subconscious hears, "I am not wealthy yet." When you say, "It will happen," your subconscious concludes, "It is not happening now." This constant deferral creates a vibrational loop where the future becomes an escape rather than an embodiment. You begin to live in the emotional frequency of waiting, and life mirrors that waiting with precision. This is not because you lack talent, intelligence, discipline, or desire. It is because your inner state continues to place wealth in the distance, as if reality must first approve of you before you can claim it. But the universe does not respond to effort or delay. It responds to assumption. Quantum psychology and neuroscience both reveal a profound truth. To the subconscious, the imagined and the real are processed almost identically. The brain does not distinguish between a vividly felt internal state and an external event. Whenever you embody the feeling of a state, not the fantasy of it, but the emotional atmosphere of it, your nervous system begins to accept it as familiar. Familiarity becomes identity. Identity becomes expectation. And expectation becomes reality. This is why Neville Goddard insisted that you must feel the wish fulfilled, not as a performance, not as a technique, but as a return to your original state of creative authorship. The twist is simple but transformative. Assuming wealth is not pretending. It is aligning your internal reality with the truth you are choosing to live in. When you assume the identity of someone who is already wealthy, your mind stops searching for proof and begins generating direction. Your decisions shift, your energy softens, your posture changes, the way you speak to yourself changes. You no longer look at money with longing or fear. You look at it with the quiet familiarity of someone who recognizes it as an ally rather than an exception. Identity makes wealth normal. And when wealth becomes normal, it becomes inevitable. There is a practical transformation that occurs the moment you allow yourself to inhabit one single scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. It could be a moment of paying something with ease, a moment of breathing without financial tension, a moment of standing in your home and feeling it as a sanctuary of abundance, a moment of receiving good news with calm gratitude rather than disbelief. This scene becomes an inner anchor. Each time you revisit it, even for a few seconds, your subconscious receives the message, "This is who I am now." Consistency turns the imagined moment into an embodied identity, and identity reshapes the world around you. The process can be understood through a simple image. A king does not try to be royal. He does not chase authority. He does not perform worthiness. He sits on the throne and the kingdom rearranges itself in accordance with his presence. His identity is the command. His assumption is the law. When you assume the identity of wealth, the same principle applies. Reality begins to reorganize around the version of you who leads from the end rather than pleading from the beginning. You stop trying to earn the throne. You simply take your seat. Something shifts the moment you stop placing wealth in the future and begin inhabiting it in the present. It isn't dramatic or overwhelming. It feels more like an inner settling, a quiet grounding, as if your entire body finally exhales after years of tension. You no longer move toward abundance with the desperation of someone trying to secure their place in the world. You move with the steadiness of someone who knows they already belong. At first, a subtle fear might rise, the fear that nothing will change, the fear that you are pretending. This fear is only the echo of the old identity, the one that lived in anticipation and doubt. When you allow that echo to pass without attaching to it, you begin to notice a different sensation emerging beneath it: expectancy. You start to feel that life is not testing you anymore. Life is listening to you. Once your identity shifts, your perception shifts with it. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to keep up. The way you speak to yourself changes. Your decisions feel cleaner, more aligned, less emotionally loaded. People respond to you differently without knowing why. They sense the coherence in your presence. This is the halo effect at work, the inner change that quietly reshapes how the world perceives you. Then something remarkable begins to occur in your environment. Circumstances that once felt resistant begin to soften. Delays resolve themselves. Doors you didn't know existed start to open. It feels as if life is reorganizing itself around your new state, not because you forced anything, but because you finally stopped contradicting your own desire. You are no longer sending mixed signals to the universe. Your energy, your identity, your choices, and your expectations are finally aligned. You notice the difference in everyday moments, the way you breathe when you make decisions, the way you hold your posture when opportunities appear, the calm that replaces the old tension around money. You act from a quiet confidence rather than from fear of losing control. This is not a performance, it is a natural expression of someone who feels safe in their own expansion. This shift can be understood through a simple image. When a single note vibrates on an instrument, the entire body of the instrument resonates along with it. In the same way, once the inner frequency of wealth stabilizes within you, your entire life begins to harmonize with it. People, opportunities, and experiences start moving in synchrony with your new identity. When you remain loyal to the wealthy version of yourself, reality has no choice but to adjust. It doesn't resist your transformation, it completes it. When you finally accept wealth as your natural state, the struggle dissolves. Neville's truth becomes evident. Assumption shapes reality. As your subconscious identity shifts, your environment reorganizes itself with coherence. Money stops feeling distant and begins reflecting who you are now. Embody the state, and life aligns without resistance.